Far too often, people wait until the absolute last minute to reach out to the expert. And I think it really is important to have these discovery calls sooner than later. But it's better to know what's on the horizon now. But again, like Ryan mentioned throughout this video, it's also up to us to know what business are we building. Way too often people show up, I've seen at least to accountants or lawyers being like, how are we going to get rich in real estate? And, who owns all this real estate? Really important that we reach out to our local experts and just explore these ideas sooner than later so that everyone at home can make sure that they're making the right moves at the right time. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with Canada's favorite real estate lawyer. We've got Ryan from Carson Law, and in today's video, he's going to be really just breaking down for us the process of incorporating our real estate activities and when do we need to reach out to a lawyer, and really covering all the questions you guys constantly have around incorporating. So we decided to go right to the source and talk to a lawyer. If you guys are enjoying these videos where we reach out to local experts and really break down exactly what you need to know, please smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're new to my channel, and sharing's caring. So please share this on whatever social media platform you're watching. And now let's jump into this video with Ryan. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with Ryan from Carson Law. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, man, how are you doing? I'm good.
Good to see you back, and awesome to have you back. New year, new YouTube channel, no beard. You're growing the beard great. So we've got a nice counterbalance there. And today's video, we're really just going to be exploring, setting up a corporation as a real estate investor. What aspects should we loop our lawyer in? And I'd love to later on in the video even explore, maybe some of the example structures you've seen clients set up in the past for their situations. But I guess as a real estate investor, when should I be talking to my lawyer about incorporating?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's one that we constantly kind of will get, and obviously the real estate investors will constantly kind of have it in front of them to make a decision on. I think ultimately at the end of the day, every real estate investor should likely be incorporated. Obviously, there's a timing mechanism of when it might be right. I think at a very high level, first and foremost, it's really important to get it set up so that the accountant really should be involved right kind of at the beginning of like the investors, planning both short, medium, and long term, because obviously the real estate investor is doing this as a primary or secondary business to in part make money, right? Mm-hmm. So the accountants really need to be involved because they're going to be able to find ways to make sure that at the end of the day, you can be as profitable and as efficient as you can from a tax perspective to save as much money as you can. And so one of the ways they're going to look at doing that, which then brings in the lawyer, is through incorporation. And so the corporate structure, or the corporate shell, the main premise behind it, again, at a very high level, is going to be, how do we find a way to pay as little or as low a tax rate as we can? And, everybody knows in Canada, as individuals, we have a very heavy tax burden to pay. And I suspect most of our real estate investors are going to fall into the, upper half of the tax brackets. You're looking at probably 30, 35, 40, maybe even into the 50, 55 plus range. So, you don't want to have a lot of your money in that bracket because that's a lot of money out the door to the CRA. So if you can help it, if you create the corporate structure and this is the key part. The key part is not sucking it out of the corp and paying yourself. You have to keep it in a corporate structure, right? So it either has to stay in that corporation to be taxed at the corporate level, which is somewhere between 12 and 18%. So significantly better than like 30 or 40 or 50, or it has to stay in, and this is where the accountants are going to advise, like an interconnected corporation. So you might have several corporations all sitting in some sort of corporate hierarchy and structure. And so it may be that even though you move money from one corp to the other and so forth, it's still all getting paid out at the corporate tax level and not a hit at a personal level. So that's one main area and reason why you'd want to do incorporations. It's going to be that tax efficiency. It's going to be hopefully that reduced tax burden and tax payment. The other reason, well, there's two more reasons, I guess, which are more legal than they are so to be like tax and money. Most people probably know, and if they don't, they're about to find out. Being incorporated will create a separation between your corporate business assets on the one hand and then your personal assets on the other. So the key will be anything that you own and house under that corporate entity will not be liable to personal debts. And then conversely, anything that you have over in your personal world isn't going to be subject to, to business liability and debts, right? So you're creating almost like this legal shield between your self personally and your assets personally, and then your business and your corporate assets, but also you're protecting them from a liability point of view too. There's a couple exceptions where there's going to be the line's going to get crossed. An easy example is with a real estate investor, you have a company, a corporation owning all your real estate properties, but your mortgage, even though it's in the corporate name, has a personal guarantee. Well, that basically they could come after you personally and your personal assets if the company can't pay back the mortgage. So that's an example of where there would be a crossing of the line. But, for somebody to sue you corporately to come after you in a personal nature, they wouldn't be able to do that, right? And vice versa. If you got sued personally, they're not going to be able to come after all your real estate corporate assets. So it's a dividing and hopefully insulating from liability your different business and personal assets, right? One other reason why you'd want to potentially incorporate is it creates some estate planning options for you. Again, saving you money and tax that you wouldn't have the ability to do. So there's a principle with estate lawyers right now who help clients do planning. You can do what's called a primary secondary will, or some people call it a personal corporate will. So you'd have a separate corporate will or the secondary will. It's the same thing, just some people call it differently in the industry, for just your corporate assets. So assets owned by corporations. So the benefit there is you're separating them out. And because you've created this secondary estate or corporate estate, which has a definitive, end group of beneficiaries, those assets get to bypass or significantly have reduced estate taxes through the probate process. So they basically kind of avoid probate. So there could be a significant estate tax legacy savings as well to become incorporated. So, I mean, generally, high level speaking, this is a long answer to your short question. Number one, you'd want to bring the lawyer and the accountant in as early as you can in your planning process. If you've already got started and you're already well on your way, well, it's never too late. You should be working with an accountant and you should work with a lawyer. So bring them in right away. Definitely have the accountant give you a tax overview and a tax opinion on your goals, like short, medium, and long. And then that will determine how quickly and at what point you get incorporated. I mean, benefits and reasons to do it other than just saving taxes and having lower tax payments to pay would be the estate planning that we mentioned, and then asset and liability protection and separation. So those would be the things I would say at a high level there. You also said, well, maybe give some examples of clients that we've worked with and when they did and when they didn't. So one example I always like to give is, everybody thinks there's a magic number. If I make so much money personally, or I make so much money through the business, that's when I should incorporate. I don't want to say that's not true. There is probably there is some truth to that. But I think the bigger question and the one that's more on point is, what are you doing with the money that you make? So if in the example or in the more general discussion that we just had, one of our points was, what are you going to do with the money that your business makes? Are you going to keep it all in a corporation, or are you going to keep it all in the business? You don't need to live off it. So if we have real estate investors, and we have quite a few that are already doing pretty well personally with whatever their job is. Maybe they're like doctors, or they're realtors, or they're business people, and they're doing this not to live off this money, but to further subsidize and create an additional level of income that's completely passive. They don't need it to keep up with the Joneses, or pay their bills or anything like that. Their primary career job is doing that for them, and will continue to do so. But that, even if you're only making 10 grand a year off your your real estate investment, it's probably still not a bad idea to incorporate. Because if you've got that small amount of, $50,000 or whatever retained in the business, wouldn't you rather pay only 12% on that 50 versus, throwing it in with your personal income, which is already in one of the highest tax brackets? You're going to lose 40 to 50% of that 50,000, as opposed to just, 12 to 18%. Mm-hmm. So if you can retain any sum of money, the larger, the better, all within the corporation or significantly within the corporation, and invest at a corporate level, that is one definite situation where we've encouraged our clients, they need to be incorporated. Mm-hmm. Another different way we've used incorporations for our clients is as they've grown, creating with their accountants corporate / family trust structures. Mm-hmm. So this is typically as they become a little potentially more wealthy through both their personal and real estate investment, streams of income.
Yeah. And Ryan, if I could jump in there for a sec, because I know that everything's relative and situational, but people immediately are going to want to know, at what wealth level should I be reaching out? Is that at 100,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million? Would you mind giving just some broad guidance there?
Well, again, I think I'd revert back to the point that I made just a moment ago, which is, if you can leave money in the business, then you should have it incorporated. So if you do not need a significant portion of, or any of your real estate investment money to pay bills and live off, you should incorporate. So like I said, if that's only $50,000 a year that you're making net, but it's all going to be left at a corporate level, then I don't see why you would not want to incorporate. Flip side, if you need to use every cent you make, but you make $1 million in your real estate investing, but you pull it all out to pay bills and live off of and everything like that, I think it's going to be harder pressed to find some benefit to incorporating, because you've pulled it all out now. So it's a lot harder to shelter it from a tax perspective.
And so building upon that, at what size of net worth you start to see clients really starting to think about trust and legacy and passing on that wealth to future generations?
Yeah. So, I think, again, the sooner the better. That's why, meeting with a really experienced accounting / tax planning group is so crucial. I'm not going to be able to offer the tax advice, but we work with those people to implement it all, right? From a document and a corporate level. I think most people would look at two things. One, and maybe I'll use myself as an example. So, I'm early 40s. I'm turning 42. My wife's turning 40. Through real estate investing, and then our personal incomes and other businesses and so forth. At the end of the day, we're probably around probably about $500,000 a year or so, something like that. Maybe a little bit more on a good year, maybe a little bit less on a bad year. And because of two factors, my accountants have basically said to me, we need to create multiple corporate structures for you and look at a family trust. So the reason the family trust comes into play is because I have kids that are younger, and a family trust, the benefit in enacting a family trust is if you have time, like if you were trying to do this all, later in your years, they would probably have told me there's no point to it now. Mm-hmm. You want to use a family trust when your kids are relatively younger, so you can start doing things that are of a tax beneficial nature for things like school and education, and then some other legacy opportunities, right? But you got to kind of do it over time. It's too impossible to try to jam it in like in your latter years for a family trust, right? So the family trust, because I have a certain amount of like income coming in, and because I have a certain amount of time in front of me to do the planning, it makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, that's a conversation for you to have with everybody has to have with their accountants, but that's a conversation. If you can get a family trust, start to get that in place, like in your, mid to late 30s, early 40s, I think that's kind of like the sweet spot. I mean, it could be earlier in your years, it could be a little bit later, mm-hmm. but I think if you start going, too much later than your late 40s, early 50s, the trust might not be the most beneficial tax piece. But so a family trust is about time and some income level. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece in my example with me and my wife having the income we have, it just got to a point where they're like, okay, you don't need all this mm-hmm. to I'm not buying Ferraris every day and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Right. So I'm not taking all this out. I want to start keeping a lot of it in corporate levels and invest at my corporate level, because then I'm going to start saving more and more money on taxes. Right. So try to live off, with the lifestyle, try to live off about 240, mm-hmm. and then try to keep as much as I can aside to reinvest it at a corporate level and, or, pay whatever taxes I need to pay as well. Right. So that's my example, but doesn't mean that everybody, like, you got to mm-hmm. have $500,000 to try to do this. Right. I think the biggest key is how much, if any, of the money are you leaving in the business? If the answer is you can leave money in the business to reinvest at a corporate level, then I think it becomes, you're already in the yes box. It's just a question of, at what point and how much do you leave in there, right? From the corporate standpoint. So mm-hmm. I think that's the big thing. It's really, really hard to just give a number. Yeah. I mean, because the bottom line is everybody's different. Everybody's mm-hmm. using the money differently. Everybody has different habits and things that they, want to spend their money on. Everybody has a different train of thought on how it's best to save and invest. And so all those things have impacts on, their money. But I think the short answer is you probably want to have a base salary, like outside of real estate, somewhere between like 50 and 100, and have that basically you want that to take care of your lifestyle mm-hmm. and your bills. And then if you've got 50 plus that you can sock away and keep in the corporate level for real estate, I think it becomes worth it. And then anything over and above that is just becomes mm-hmm. exponential, right? You just exponentially should be saving more and more that you save at a corporate level. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's using me as a real life example, as a person and as potentially a real estate investor who's talked to their accountant. And that's where I went. I don't mm-hmm. know the answers to this, right? I went to my tax guys and said, I just basically asked them a very pointed question. I just said, should I have a family trust? And, what other corporate structure should I be doing? Like, you guys have my taxes. You can see the picture, what should I be doing? Right. And, took them a little while to do the assessment and so forth of it, a couple months and so forth. But, they came back with, yeah, you should have some different corporate structure, some corporate investing, and a family trust. That worked for me and where I wanted to go. So family trust is probably going to be like a bit more advanced than most people need. Most people would go there after they already have some corporation in the mix. It'd be probably some corporation first by itself. Then depending on how you're growing, you know, these are going to be the family trust guys and girls out there are going to be the ones that have already been doing it. They probably got several properties, you know, all doing really good cash flow. Those people are going to be the ones that are probably going to start to then benefit and look at a family trust.
Yeah, I really appreciate you breaking it down and even using yourself as an example, Ryan, because I know this is a subject matter that there's a lot of confusion around. People have a lot of questions, and oftentimes they just don't even know where to start. So to summarize, it sounds like for anyone in the audience, you know, it really starts by just reaching out to your power network, right? Your power team, talking to your accountant, talking to your lawyer. And this isn't, you know, a one-side conversation. We really do need to talk to both sides of our experts, right? So the accounting and the lawyer side, and really just get them working together. I'd be curious, Ryan, before we wrap up, how does that normally play out? Is it, you know, client contacts accountant, client contacts lawyer, and they're playing telephone at some point in time? Do you guys all get together on a call or in a room together and map it out? Do you and the accountant just work together and put together some optimal scenarios for the client?
Yeah. Typically the way it works for me is we'll encourage them to go to their accountant. Their accountants, depending on, you know, who they are, will have their own process, but they'll do an analysis and a review and then typically give them an opinion. And then depending on what the client wants to do from that review and opinion, they would then typically connect with us as the lawyer for the client. And they typically, in the industry, we kind of call it a step memo, is sort of what we call it. They give us this corporate step memo on the tax advice to affect the business and estate plan of our mutual client, right? So we get this step memo, and then we basically kind of we would review it with the client, but more from a legal standpoint, as opposed to the tax explanation that's already been reviewed with the accountant. And then if we have any questions, we, you know, circle around a couple times with the accountant, but we typically would put it into play from the step memo. So it's kind of start with the accountant, do the tax plan. They kind of flush out the tax piece because obviously people want to save tax and then put more money in their pocket. And then it kind of comes to us to create the effective documents to make it all so. Family trusts, different corporations, tying it all together with various agreements of shareholders. And you start getting into tax stuff like tax rollovers and stuff under the Income Tax Act, Section 85, 86. These are all things that over time your accountants are going to give instruction and advice on, but they kind of do the first bit. They're part one, and then we become part two, basically.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to break this down for us, Ryan, because again, I know that there's a lot of questions and confusion around the subject matter. If anyone has any questions, guys, jump in the comments section, hit us up with your questions. We'll make sure we cover it on a future video. But as a reminder, as always, with these calls with Ryan, we've got a link to all of Ryan and Carson Law's contact information in the video description down below. So if you guys have any questions about family trust, setting up a corporation, or any of your real estate transactions or other related legal issues, really want to encourage you to reach out to the expert. Far too often, people wait until the absolute last minute to reach out to the expert, and you're putting them behind the eight ball. I think it really is important to have these discovery calls sooner than later. And again, don't be afraid of just having that half hour, 1 hour call just to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. Maybe we don't need to check in for another 6 months or a year in order to set up that corporate or trust structure, but it's better to know what's on the horizon now. But again, like Ryan mentioned throughout this video, it's also up to us to know what business are we building. Way too often people show up, I've seen at least to accountants or lawyers being like, I'm going to get rich in real estate. What sort of corporate structure do I need? And, you know, they've got a lot of follow-up questions like, how are we going to get rich in real estate? And, you know, who owns all this real estate and all those different little things. So again, really important that we reach out to our local experts and just explore these ideas sooner than later so that everyone at home can make sure that they're they're making the right moves at the right time, as Ryan was saying. So again, really appreciate you coming on the show, Ryan. Anything else you think that we should be aware of before we wrap up here in regards to corporations, trust, and all that good stuff?
Probably a last point, more specifically to what you just said about making sure, you don't get too far down the line and then put people behind the 8 ball. An example of where we've seen clients kind of get themselves behind the 8 ball is, like most, they get really excited about getting their first couple deals. All of a sudden they get momentum. Boom. They got like 6 or 7 properties before they know it, all in their personal names. Now they go and they do all this stuff we're talking about doing, getting the accountant involved, getting involved with a lawyer. And here's the problem. It's recommended that they take all those properties, transition them into corporate names. You're going to pay land transfer tax all over again on all those properties. So that might be another determinative factor on why you might want to incorporate right off the gun or as soon as you can, even though maybe you're not right there yet for all like the tax benefits from an income tax perspective. But again, you can be benefiting right away on the land transfer tax perspective. So it means you don't put it into your personal name and then down the road have to do a secondary transfer and get dinged again on the now value of this property that's probably gone up. So now you're paying even more land transfer tax than you previously did. Why not just put it in corporately, even though maybe income tax wise, it's not the greatest benefit at the moment. I don't think it's going to do you any major harm, but it's going to save you that second transfer and that second round of land transfer tax. So that might be the only thing that I was thinking about, came to mind when you just said your bit. So, and that's something we have seen lots of clients get stuck with, So basically, they move forward with their real estate empire with like 20 and 30 or, whatever it happens to be, but they've got all these corporately owned assets. And then the first couple, you can always tell which ones they are because there's like 5 of them or 2 or 3, and they're just sitting there by themselves, personally owned, right? Until they get sold or whatever, right? So that might be another reason why, if you're only in the planning point or you haven't really started yet, you might decide to incorporate, even though there's not going to be a huge income tax savings, but you're devoted to this and you want to really grow an empire of real estate. You don't want to get into a situation where you have to transfer them down the road and pay land transfer tax again. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points there. And again, guys, link to all Ryan's contact information in the description down below. Really appreciate Ryan. You're always a wealth of information. I know the audience loves it, and looking forward to having you on future videos as well. Thanks again to Ryan for taking the time to shoot this video. I hope it really shed some light on the subject matter of when to incorporate and some of the logic behind why to incorporate when it comes to your real estate activities. If you have any questions for Ryan, we've got a link to all his information and contact information in the video description down below. Really want to encourage you to reach out to Ryan. He's just a wealth of information. And I'm just so happy we can bring on local experts like Ryan and share their perspective with you guys. Because I remember back in 2010 when I originally started thinking about investing in real estate and finally took the leap, it was really scary because I had no one to lean on. So I believe that being part of a community and having local experts is absolutely crucial to your long-term success and scalability of your real estate portfolio. So if you guys want to join a community, a quick reminder, we've got Cashflow Tribe. I'll throw a link in the video description as well. Jump over to Cashflow Tribe and check us out.